me in this crazy wind. It is Wednesday, the 31st of December, 2025. And it means it is the last day of the year. So there's big news happening on this New Year's Eve. Coming to you live from Israel. I'm here to give you the updates on what's going on with Iran and the U.S. and Israel. And right now we're seeing a lot of, formidable headlines, if you want to call it that way, in between what happened at Mar-a-Lago a couple of days ago when Trump and Netanyahu met at the president's residence in Florida, and basically whatever daylight had existed between the U.S. and Israel is officially closed. There is no daylight between the U.S. and Israel's position vis-a-vis Iran. If Iran continues to develop nuclear weapons, the U.S. and Israel will make sure that their progress is stopped or delayed as much as possible. And if they continue to develop even ballistic missiles, the same thing. So there is no daylight in that capacity in the policy positions of the two governments, right, the U.S. and Israel. And it is not a question that's even up for debate, because Trump has said very clearly that the U.S. would certainly make sure that Iran does not obtain nuclear weapons, and that even if they attempt to build more ballistic missiles en masse, that too would be stopped by force if necessary. Made it very clear in what he said. At the same time, Israel has shown intelligence to the U.S. and has also published a report publicly that shows that Iran is in fact attempting to build thousands of ballistic missiles, and they're trying to do that with every last penny that they have, apparently. This despite the country's economy going to heck. Their conversion rate right now is around, I think it's around 1.4 million Iranian, whatever they call them, rials, something like that. 1.4 million of their currency for $1. That is a staggering devaluation of their currency, which should be no surprise. I mean, what do you expect when you have an Islamist fundamentalist terror sponsoring government, right, that is literally feeding all of the proxies like the Hamas and the Houthis and the Hezbollah and others around the world, and especially in the Middle East, to commit acts of terrorism, spend all their money on that instead of actual things they need for their own people. Well, that's because you have to remember, as I've been telling you forever, the government in Iran is jihadist and Islamist. And what does that mean? That means that they actually want the end of the world. You may say, no, they're just saying that. They don't actually want that. They're not actually suicidal. That means you don't understand them. They are a death cult. 100% a death cult. If you don't understand that, well, you just don't know the situation. You don't know the reality of what these Ayatollahs actually want. They've been saying it loud and clear for decades. In fact, they've been saying it loud and clear for centuries, but they've been in power now in Iran for 47 years, and that is exactly what they want, and that has never changed, and is not going to change until they are out of power, and even after that, they will still want that, they just won't be in power. The question is, are the protests that we're seeing in Iran actually going to lead to the overthrow of the government in Iran? And again, like I said many times before, it may be that this is the time and place that it's going to happen, but I ain't waiting up nights, right? Like, it could very well be that this is the thing, the straw that breaks the camel's back. It could very well be that the economy is the thing that makes the Iranians say, okay, enough is enough already. We got to get rid of these guys. but they still have all the guns, and they still have all the bullets, and they still have all the bombs in the hands of the Ayatollahs and their IRGC terrorist army. And you may think, well, they don't have enough money to send their soldiers to fight against the people. You would be wrong. Okay? Despite the fact that Iran's economy is crap, their government still has a lot of money in its treasury. Even though their government is essentially insolvent, they still have a lot of money gathered over the decades in their treasuries, right? How much? Well, that's a question that only time will answer. But at the moment, it looks very much like the Iranian government, which is still in power, certainly has enough money and its resources to attack its own civilians. And that is exactly what we've seen them begin to do, which is exactly what I told you that they would do. In fact, just yesterday in my live stream about this, I told you that this is going to happen. They're going to let them vent their grievances until such time as either the people calm down or the government says, all right, we've had enough. They're not coming down. Let's get rid of these people. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're starting to tear gas them. They're starting to shoot at them. They're basically doing the same old playbook that they've always done. Hello there. How are you? I see you in the comments. Feel free to ask any questions you like. And by all means, like and subscribe to this video. Like and subscribe to my channel if you will. Like this video, and subscribe to my channel. I think that's how you're supposed to say it. Help me get the word out to more people. Thanks. I appreciate it. We're not seeing at the moment a mass of people significant enough to actually overthrow the government. Now, I know people are saying, well, there's millions of people marching in the street. We have not seen millions of people marching in the street. We've seen thousands, maybe even tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands. But you're going to need more than that to overthrow the actual regime. You're going to need a few million people to be out and not marching in the streets, but overrunning the government institutions and military bases. That's what needs to happen, and it needs to happen swiftly, right? And you see all the messages from Pahlavi, and you see all the messages from Iranian dissidents and pro-Iranian people, like, people who are supportive of the people of Iran against the regime, whether they're Iranian or of other nationalities. All that messaging is wonderful, but it doesn't change the price of tea in Tehran, right? You need to actually see the people of Tehran get up off their backsides and go and do something about it. And protesting in the streets, marching peacefully, shouting Javid Shah and shouting the name of Shah Reza Pahlavi and these things like death to the dictator and death to Khamenei, which is the Ayatollah. All of that is noise, signifying nothing if they don't actually do something about it. So, that is the quick update for you on what is the situation, right, in between Israel and the U.S. and Iran, right? And that is the thing is, you have to realize the broader dynamics, the strategic dynamics of what this changes. If in fact the people of Iran manage to overthrow their regime, it would be a massive, massive game changer for the world, right? Because gone would be a lot of the funding for a lot of these terror groups. Yes, some of them, like Hamas and Hezbollah, still have funding from other sources, but it would be still the loss of a primary source of their funding for their terrorist ways. And that would mean effectively, hello there, shalom. It would mean effectively, that these entities would be short of cash significantly, and that their ambitions would have to be reduced significantly, if not cut back to nothing. So while I am not hopeful, or rather, I should say, while I am not optimistic that this is a done deal, because it's not, we are still a long way from seeing the actual dictatorship in Iran get overthrown. I am cautiously hopeful that it will happen. because it would be getting rid of the very worst of the governments and organizations and entities that are actively funding the jihadism that we see around the world, right? Whose money principally comes from Iran. And yes, sure, a lot of it now also comes from places like Qatar. And it also comes from the EU. And it also comes from humanitarian aid programs, which are a joke, funding terrorists directly. And it also comes from the criminal activity that these terrorists participate in, right? They are not innocent people. So I am cautiously hopeful, but I wouldn't yet say that I'm cautiously optimistic, really, even though I may have used those words in recent days. I'm not actually cautiously optimistic that this is going to happen anytime soon. Why? Well, because we've seen this kind of thing happen before, and it has led to nothing. It has led to no change. And the reason it has led to no change is because, for the very same reasons that we're seeing no change right now, the people of Iran have not shown the perseverance necessary or the tenacity necessary to actually get rid of their dictators. It's that simple, right? Until they actually follow through with what they're doing and force these people to actually leave power, that dictatorship remains in place, and they're not going anywhere. So that's my quick update for you guys. Again, like and subscribe to this video if you would, please. I really, subscribe to my channel if you would. I appreciate it a lot. I'm very thankful for all the people who have subscribed in recent days, weeks, and months. It means a lot to me. I'm now over 500 subs. Yay. Maybe one day I'll hit 1,000. I don't know. It would be nice. I just want to get, more people out there watching what I have to say because, well, I've been doing this for a very long time, far longer than most of the analysts you see out there have even been alive. Why? Well, because I've been interested in the topic of the Middle East conflict since more than several decades. And actively doing things about it, writing and talking, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's the quick update for you. There is one other piece of interesting news, if you will, which is that Israel's population for 2025 has apparently grown only by 0.9%, which is the lowest ever since Israel's founding in 1948. And the very simple reason for it is that Israel has had more people leave the country than migrate to the country. So it has nothing to do with birth rates or anything like that, but it has to do with the fact that about 85,000 people left the country in 2025 and about 30,000 people migrated to the country. Maybe it's 80,000 left and 35,000 people, whatever it is. There's a difference of around 30 or 40,000 people net negative on the population, on the migration issue. So if you include all the birth rates and everything else, basically the migrations and the birth rates, the population has grown 0.9%. It's the first time ever that it's been below like a percent. And it's the third time only that it was below 1.5%. And the two times that it was 1.5% or lower were both in the like early 1980s or so. And since then, the population has continually grown at a healthier rate than 1.5%, which is fairly impressive. Especially for a Western country, so secularized, Westernized type of country. However, we do see that currently there is a net negative on the migration, right? People are leaving Israel more than they're moving to Israel, which is very different than 2 years ago when this war started, when we actually saw population increase, not insignificantly, despite the fact that we were heading into a war and a prolonged one. It's now the longest war that Israel has fought, right, in terms of an active war. Yes, we've been at war since the beginning of the state with a bunch of countries who have not signed peace agreements with us. So technically, we're in a state of war with a bunch of countries, including Syria and Lebanon and whatever, But overall, In terms of an active war, this is the longest war Israel has fought. And so, yes, after a couple of years, it's not unexpected and it's not surprising to see that there is an impact on the population. That's just a normal thing, really. It's fully expected if you think about it. It's not surprising to anyone, certainly not to me. Um, so that's something that's happening. It is relatively newsworthy in the sense of, yeah, it matters because we don't want our population to shrink. However, it it's not something to be terrified about if you're living in Israel because we still did have a positive population growth. It was just less than 1%. And when this war effectively dies down after the Hamas is disarmed and removed from power, which should happen within the coming months, one way or the other, then you will probably see a return to net positive migration and a higher growth rate again in terms of the population. Now, maybe it happens in 2026, maybe not. I think it probably will. Um, it all depends on what happens with the war situation, right? If, for example, Iran falls, it's going to make it a lot harder for Hamas to keep doing their thing, even though they do get funding from Qatar as well. And at this point, primarily from Qatar, probably. But they also get money from criminal activity in other parts of the world where they fraudulently raise money for charitable causes that end up in the hands of the terrorists. And we know that they do that at the tune of many, many millions of dollars per year, if not more. In fact, in Italy, just the other day, as I reported, as I covered for you guys, the Italian authorities busted Hamas fundraising organizations that were, in theory, raising money for charity, and yet the money went into the hands of terrorists. And we're talking an amount of like somewhere between $7 and $10 million, maybe a bit more, over just the past couple of years, right? So God knows how much they've raised over the last decades, right? Just in Italy. And we know that in the US, they raise far more than that every single year. And a lot of that money ends up directly in the hands of the terrorists. In fact, most of it does. We know that. I've been reporting on that. I've been working on that and analyzing that and reporting on it and publishing material about that since literally the early 1990s. Okay. So this is not a surprise. This is something that we've seen happen historically with Hamas fundraising. But again, if the Iranian dictatorship does fall, it will cut off a significant amount of funding for Hezbollah, even though they make a lot of money overseas with crime and other sources like EU funding, etc. It will cut off a lot of funding for the, primarily all of it for the Houthis. It will cut off funding for the Hamas. It will cut off funding for a lot of Islamic State operations happening in Syria and happening in North Africa. So it would generally be a good thing, right? It would get rid of a lot of the terrorism that's happening because they wouldn't be able to conduct as much terror as they currently do. Would it get rid of terrorism entirely? Probably not, unfortunately. Jihadism isn't as simple as just getting rid of the Islamic regime in Iran. However, they are the head of the snake. So it would be a big deal if they are overthrown and replaced by, hopefully, a democratic government. Again, I'm not losing sleep over that. I'm not hopeful that they're just going to suddenly become super pro-democracy people. I know many people say that they are, and a lot of Iranian dissidents say that they're pro-democracy, etc. Iranian dissidents usually live in the West, in democratic countries. So, of course, they're pro-democracy. And, of course, they see in their echo chamber that Iranians are pro-democracy. But if you actually ask the average person on the street in Tehran, are you pro-democracy or something else, who knows what they're going to tell you? They can't really speak freely at the moment. Right? Yeah, I know they're out there in the streets protesting now. Let's see how long that lasts. And notice they're not chanting for democracy. They're chanting for the return of a king. They want the prince who was ousted with his father, who was the king, the Shah. They want that prince to return and become the king. That's not exactly chanting for democracy. That's not exactly chanting for Western democratic values. Now, you may say, well, he has democratic values. He's been living in America his whole, like the last 47 years, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't make him a democracy leader, right? It makes him a royal who's been living off of the fruits of democracy. democracy for almost 5 decades, and that does not make him a bastion of democracy. I'm sorry. The proof is in the pudding. It will take a while. Now, sure, I would rather that he be in power because change is better, right? And he certainly has seen the value of Western democracy, but we still don't have evidence that he's actually going to implement a democratic country in Iran if he were to be returned to power. I know he said things that allude to that, but there's no meat and potatoes yet. And the Ayatollah is still in power. So these things matter. The details matter. We'll see what happens. Time will tell. That's all we can really count on for now, right? Hopefully, we'll see the government in Iran be overthrown. But again, like, I ain't waiting up nights, man. I'm just not. Like, I'm not holding my breath. If it happens, wonderful. That'd be amazing. Something we've all been waiting for nearly 5 decades now. But we're still a long way from seeing that actually happen, in my opinion. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope I can come on in the next video and tell you, wow, the regime has been overthrown. Like, I hope they're doing it today. Yeah? And I hope that every day. But I'm not holding my breath. I hope you understand what I'm saying. So that's going to do it for now. Thanks again for watching this video. Please like the video and subscribe and leave a comment and share. Hit that notification bell. And yeah, that'll do it. Until the next time, I bid you all peace and shalom. See ya.